So something happened mid day four. While we were discussing things and specifically going back and forth on like sales and how we want to be approaching customers, uh, they mentioned that one customer from 7 years gave them a phone call. And for me, my eyes like lit up. I was like, what? And they were like, yes, sometime a week before that, a customer actually from 7 years gave them a phone call. And was asking if they could actually he's what they first explained to me was he said he wanted a tank. And I was like, stop. I paused that for a second, and I told them, continue explaining what you were trying to explain to me, and let's finish this discussion first. Let us finalize, because not like they were basically using that, they were feeling good that somebody from 7 years called them and wanted a tank, which is very much a positive thing. Like that's a repeat customer and that's a long-term customer. Like after 7 years, the guy was like, I remember where I bought this tank. I want another one. Right? Because that's literally it. He has a tank. That customer realized there are droughts and realized he might need an extra tank. And the first person he thought of were the people who sold him high quality tanks. And I was like, stop, 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 stop. I actually write it here at the top of the page. Old customer. I circle it and I go back because at that point I remember we were discussing like it's a different separate paper because I had to like break it and like put it back in a different place. But we were talking about the type of salespeople they had and how they conduct sales. And there's that guy with them that is actually Kurdish from Syria, and how he basically is handling customers and technically he's responding to phone calls from Facebook and everything like that. Like it was a mess of random bits and pieces of information that I was trying to collect in order to understand where I could start with them, because that was the day we are going to start creating the brand. We're going to start deeply thinking of the brand. Like we already thought of the hawk, we already thought of our image, our own personalities. We already discussed like the how other people are interacting with the market, but now what would we want to represent in the market? So I halted it for a second and I went back. I finished the basically the I finished the information that I was taking, and then I started explaining to them how I explained to them basically like if we were to target Facebook or use Facebook ads or Instagram or TikTok, or over there for some reason they still have Snapchat. I don't know. In Lebanon we don't have Snapchat the way it used to be. I heard it's a thing in other countries still. But again, like, hey, man, that's not my trend, it's their trend, which means I have to research those technologies in order to utilize them, right? But so far, I'm competent to a certain point with Facebook, although this will be my first proper project after I actually did my course and did all that research. But I was reflecting back and forth on how we would do the ads. So I wrote down basically, uh, maybe we have to do advertisements for plumbers. Because if we can isolate plumbers, then these are the people that work on pipes, and eventually, if we convince the plumbers, then each individual plumber is a salesman of our is a representative of the company. Then maybe we can actually give them a percentage as a discount, and instead of not as a discount, as a commission. And then we basically have everyone who's a professional plumber in the country register with us, which will expand our network. And on top of all of that, we'll be able to kind of like any person who's having tank issues is going to call a plumber. And when the plumber goes, he would reflect us and the plumber would make a commission. And basically, that's how we can expand. Valid business idea. Another one was real estate agents, because ultimately, a lot of real estate agents would, over there, through my research and asking a lot of questions. By the way, the country over there is still separated. If you're married, you live in one place. If you're not married, you live in another. If you're a woman, there has to be a family or you have to live in a UN compound. So still cute, right? Like, but so maybe real estate agents, maybe homeowners, we can target them. And I started explaining how we can actually like maybe find them through the actual Facebook and through Pixel, Facebook Pixel, because Facebook Pixel is what finds you this information. And as I started explaining it to them, and I was like, okay, so like after we explained them, because I was talking about branding and all kinds of things, branding the day before, I looked at them and I was like, okay, so but what about us? Who are the people that we're targeting? We're targeting or homeowners, farmers, uh, local store owners, wives, young generations. We never know where our niche could be and how we can penetrate the market. And one of my thoughts was like, if we just promote our tanks to wives, then every single woman in her household will start basically biting the ear of her husband. And I'm smiling because that's the fucking truth, right? Biting the ear of her husband. And I'm telling him that I need better water to cook and I can do all kinds of stuff. And by moving in that direction, we'll be able to kind of like secure a lot more stubborn people that don't care to look at things, but then basically just do it to please the wives and eventually kind of like score higher or secure more personnel. If we succeed with women, man, that's practically 70% of the country who's married. Yeah, any country, right? Any market, any market, anything you can think about. If you secure the woman, that's practically the married portion of the country is always kind of like at the center. It's always between like 50% to like 60% because there are the younger people, which are there. And most countries have about 15 to 18% of like kids, and they have about 20% of young adults. So you're always playing with like more than 40 to 50%, above 40 and 50%. So that's like a decent market to actually capitalize on. So I started explaining all these small things to them to calm them down. And as I was explaining to them, I started like basically pointing out the the things that they represent that we have to appeal to because the concerns of a husband in the house is different from the concerns of the actual business owner and are different from the concerns of if I'm looking at you as a store owner that sells, for example, honey, your needs are different from than a store owner that basically sells computers, and your needs are different from a store owner that sells meats. Like, for example, a guy who sells meat requires a lot more water than a guy that sells computers, and a guy who sells computers requires a lot more electricity than the guy who sells meat. Huh. Probably the meat guy probably has a lot more fridges, but you know what I'm talking about, right? It probably needs a lot more hygiene products because he wants to like manage the place properly so that he doesn't get like sicknesses and all kinds of shit. Whatever. But the idea is no, any way we choose to look at the people that exist in society, they all carry certain attributes with them. They all carry certain like thoughts and processes. They all carry responsibilities on their shoulders. Some they actually acknowledge, some they don't. And it's our job kind of like to articulate them in a way so we could appeal to them better. And if you go to a mom and be like, this is good for you, she might consider it. But if you go to a mom and you say this is good for your child, then she'd actually be looking at it from a different perspective. And we need to find the winning perspective. We're doing ads for now, but we're trying to understand the people. We're trying to understand like what will we build in order for these people to kind of like look at us and be like, no, okay, I can trust them. What can we build in order to look and say, okay, these people we can actually rely on them. I want to buy their product. And nobody does that over there, especially with what we're trying to do. Like we're selling high quality plastic tanks. And I say plastic, there's like an actual term, something poly something, carbonate. No, I have no fucking idea, man. But we're selling high quality, basically, water tanks for either agriculture or for commercial use or for households and drinking water. So nobody within our field does that, and nobody does that within our quality. We are the best. And I went and I actually saw tanks and I talked to enough vendors. Everyone accepts that we're the best. They just have an issue with pricing. And the only reason they have issue with pricing is because the customer only values things based on money. So once the customer understands the value is not the actual money you're spending, but the product you're buying, then their money basically starts. Then they'd understand that if they're buying a shitty tank, they have to pay a lower price, a much lower price. And the value basically, the value system in their minds, I want to shake it. I want to move it. I want to be like, if this is actually high quality, then you should be willing to pay more. But if you know this is low quality, just because it's cheaper than the high quality one, doesn't necessarily mean it's worth that price. Like, I need to fuck with that value system. And I was explaining it to them, to the managers. Naturally, like it was there's a lot of resistance from them because they just couldn't understand how we could do that. And I had to keep like isolating different ideas and thoughts that are in my head. I kind of like explore it with them in order for them to be like, oh yes, man, if my wife wanted to buy something, then I realized that I'm going to say yes to it without thinking about it. But what would make her want to buy a plastic tank for the house? And I started asking them, okay, what are the issues they have with water that we discussed a couple of days ago? And they started pointing them out and be like, what would make your wife notice them? She's the one cooking, she's the one cleaning, she's the one supporting, or somebody else in the house is. I'm not saying that's basically whatever, man. But like, whoever's actually in charge of these things is going to notice it. And that's where the negotiations kept going back and forth. And the idea behind that, and while going through these, they actually pointed out that we have customers after 7 years. And I'm like, whoa, that's very important information. You can't just throw it out there. But now that you threw it out there, we're going to talk about it. But we're going to finish what we're talking about. At the very least, finish it in a way where all of us kind of like don't have anything more to say. So we can let it simmer in our heads, then talk about our customer, and see what happens and how we can deal with that because they have a database of every customer that came and bought something from them over the past years. So that alone requires a certain like structural approach and what are the things that we could do in order to kind of like make them repeat customers or at the very least tell them that we're still there because after 7 years like if something you can't if you're not hearing enough about it every single year you're gonna forget, right? Or you're gonna assume it's no longer there and just go with the second best option or whatever. You're gonna go with the probably the most obvious option in front of you, which is basically what could have been happening over there. But overall, we we're just doing better at why the branding. I was doing better at explaining to them that once we actually decide on our image, then anyone we target will be able to kind of like reach in an easier way. Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, by the way. I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of fun. But again, like the challenge is the resistance that they give. And I'm glad I'm doing this because I keep reminding myself of all the things that we actually talked about and all the random situations come popping in my head, even though I have written notes, but the written notes don't necessarily like describe what I was going through, describe the information. So this is awesome. Thank you.